Okay, thank you very much, Fiona, for the welcome and, of course, for the invitation to give this talk. Not my first virtual presentation this year, and I have a feeling it won't be my last either. So I will talk today about Openstreetmap, and in the spirit, I suppose, of Open Access Week, but also in the spirit of Research Week. Openstreetmap is a very important instrument in both of those. And while I'm from the computer science department, a lot of my research and I suppose my background in general is from a more geocomputational approach to problems in computer science. So I suppose the talk in general today is an introduction to OSM. And I suppose from the beginning, I make an assumption that you haven't heard a lot about OSM before. I want to try and show people the maps, the data, and the community that has grown up around OSM in Ireland and beyond. It is slightly Ireland focused, which I think we're entitled to do, just to give people, I suppose, a better feeling for Openstreetmap in Ireland. But of course, we link to global initiatives. If you wanted to try out any of the things that I show today, you would only need a web browser. I'm happy to make the slides available as soon as I'm finished with them, and there are the links there. You can look for more interesting things. So what is OSM? OSM is Openstreetmap. It's an amazing crowdsourced open data project which was founded in 2004. But I suppose really got going around 2006 or 2007. Now, the key thing to remember about Openstreetmap is it's not just a printed map or a map that we see online. It's actual geographic data. And it's very comprehensive in terms of its coverage in Ireland. There is incompletenesses in Ireland, which are being addressed, but it has global reach. And there's great flexibility in Openstreetmap, and that's what I hope to show today, that there's a very wide breadth of geographic data in Openstreetmap that people should be aware of and might consider in your general everyday usage of mapping, but also your research. What makes OSM unique is a crowdsourced approach to geographic data capture. So what that means is that citizens, like you and I, when we're not doing our day jobs, can contribute their own local knowledge and geographic data and information to the Openstreetmap project. And the whole inspiration behind Openstreetmap back in 2004 was this idea that if I contribute knowledge about my area, you contribute knowledge about your area, and we combine them together, suddenly we have a large collection of geographic information which is backed up by local geographical knowledge. So the very same concept as Wikipedia, where I would contribute to Wikipedia pages maybe on computing, someone else would contribute to Wikipedia pages on fashion or music or current affairs. And the idea is that those pages are curated and contributed by people who have knowledge in those domains. OSM evolved as a map. So I suppose the best way to show you Openstreetmap is as a map. And if you can see the left-hand side as I look at the screen here, this is what Maynooth area looked like in 2007. So essentially there was just the really important roads, for want of leaving a classification out. Whereas now, we can see what we would consider a pretty full-featured map there. We see the urban fabric of this entire region available there, and what we would consider basically a ready-to-use map. Now, Openstreetmap, as I said a few minutes ago, should be considered as a huge geographic database of data. To put into context how big this data is, and the statistics are fresh off the press for this morning, we're looking at there being 6.4 billion points or coordinates of information in there. And that's a staggering amount of data representing things like trees, bus stops, shops, basically anything that you could put a pin on a map for to represent. While 700 million sounds less compared to 6.4 billion, this is an incredible number for polygons or polylines. So they are the parts on a map or in database that represent buildings, roads, land use, etc. And then a little more high level and not so much relevant to most people is the idea of relations. And these are where we logically group things. So we might group all of the stops on the Maynooth to Dublin train line as a relation representing that train line. But probably the most startling statistic is the 7 million OSM contributors. And this essentially has been over the last 16 years. And while everybody does not contribute huge amounts of information, this is an amazing number of people to have attracted to the project. Obviously, we see this long tail that we see on the internet very commonly, that a small percentage of people do contribute the vast amount of the information, but then everyone else contributes a small little piece. And of course, all those pieces add up to give us the full picture of Openstreetmap. So most people who communicate or interact with OSM actually integrate or interact with the digital maps. And of course, the maps can be used for many different applications. Now, the real key here is that maybe for listeners or viewers that are not so familiar with databases of information, what we can have in OSM is that we have a collection of all this geographic data from around the world, and we can make maps specific to a certain style or a certain theme. So for example, if we wanted to have a map that emphasized cycling, for example, well then that map would just emphasize cycling infrastructure and would probably remove things like car parking or parking meters for cars or things like car repair shops, and it would emphasize cycle repair shops, cycle paths, cycle parking, etc. So some examples, and as I said, I've tried to provide links to all of these, so if you want to check them out afterwards. What we have on this page here is what we call in OSM the OSM standard layer. So if you went on to the OSM openstreetmap.org website, and for the sake of example now at the moment, went straight to the Maynooth area, this is what we would see. And this is what we would say is the standard layer of the OpenStreetMap database. So there's a certain coloring theme, there's a certain font, there's a certain thematic structure, meaning that you might look here and see that certain things are not there on the map. Well, this is because this takes a theme of being a more standardized map, and it tries to make a general overview, whereas on the right-hand side, we see an example of the cycle layer. And we can see that these two maps are different because things like the cycling infrastructure, cycling paths, etc., are emphasized on the cycling layer. The OSM homepage looks like this, a straightforward map. It would usually localize to approximately the country that you're currently in. And for those interested in building websites with OSM maps in the background, there are many different types of maps that we can show. And I'm just going to take the risk of clicking on a link here and showing you this particular page. And when I am working with my students in class on visualizing spatial data, if you watch the scrolling on the right-hand side, you can see different types of map renderings or different types of layers. So we can get maps that emphasize topographic features such as the mountain ranges. And then of course one that's really loved by all of the students is something like the spinal tap version of the map there, which looks very cool, may not be very practical, but shows an example of how a database holds the data, but then a map renders the pictures of that depending on what we want. Another very, very nice rendering of Openstreetmap is by the company Stamen, and they show these beautiful pencil sketches, or also their watercolor team, which I can just click to here, which has a very beautiful representation of the map. Again, practically it may not be very useful, but as you can see here, it does make a very aesthetically pleasing, for me anyway, map, and it is all based on OpenStreetMap data. What is OpenStreetMap like compared to other map providers? I just show an example here of OpenStreetMap on the left, of Google Maps in the middle, and then this is Bing Maps or Here Maps on the right-hand side. And we can see that every one of these three providers have different concepts of how much Maynooth actually exists. So Google is happy to call us Maynooth University, whereas Bing is still calling us NUI Maynooth. So there's probably an update issue there, whereas OpenStreetMap looks to have the most detailed in terms of all of the buildings and the infrastructure around the university. So you can explore that comparison on websites such as the link below. And to show OSM, one of the key things for OSM is that editing and contributions to OSM are happening all of the time. They genuinely are happening in real time. So the OSM map is not, the OSM map is a picture which may stay still depending on the application, but the OSM database is being updated constantly. So people like ourselves, people like students, people working in humanitarian projects, etc., are out there making changes and updates to the map, and we'll talk about those later. But let's just have a look at this website, which, if we just give it a moment to load, and hopefully it will load, will give us an overview of edits happening all around the world. So there's Vietnam, for example, metropolitan Paris, Russia, Germany, Poland, Ukraine, Uganda. This is real-time people editing data up to the last 2 minutes. So it's I know it jumps around a little bit, but I always find it incredible to think that this is happening right before our eyes. So who's actually using OSM in websites and applications? So what we've shown there, some of those might be less useful in an industrial sense, or maybe as a public information vehicle. Well, one of the websites that people in Ireland probably check more than most is the Met Éireann website. And if you look down at the bottom of the Met Éireann map, you will see that they are using OpenStreetMap as their underlying map for the rainfall radar and other rain reports. The Irish Seismic Network, which you may or may not know actually existed, uses OpenStreetMap as the map for displaying seismic activity and information about recent seismic activity in Ireland. Another environmentally themed website, the Environmental Protection Agency's airquality.ie website, uses OpenStreetMap as the base map for its air quality index for health map. This is allowing you to zoom right down to street level to see where the air quality monitoring station is located in your locality, or maybe in a town or city that you are visiting. Cork City Cycle Map, which is not necessarily available as a website, but is available as a PDF file, uses Openstreetmap as a means of keeping the cycle map up to date with all of the cycling infrastructure in Cork City. The European Air Quality Index, which is the European equivalent, of course, of the EPA's Air Quality Index, also uses Openstreetmap. The FBI, if you were looking for an FBI office somewhere in the world, I don't think there's one in Ireland just yet. They are using Openstreetmap to display their data and information. And before we go on to the next kind of thematic area, what we were seeing here is why are all of these different agencies using Openstreetmap? And probably the two key reasons are that it's open access. So it can be used provided that you show that attribution for the map on your website. And secondly, the fact that it is updated so frequently that it's most likely going to show you at a local level the most up-to-date version of streets and towns and cities and their infrastructure. Now, of course, a few months ago, we may not have introduced the health team as much as today, but given the coronavirus pandemic situation, obviously the emphasis on health-related websites has increased a huge amount in the last 6 to 8 months. One website that is very useful in terms of researcher information, and probably from a public point of view in certain parts of the world, is a website called healthsites.io. And the idea is that this is trying to encourage people all over the world to provide accurate information and locations for healthcare facilities all over the world. And this is probably particularly useful in countries outside of Western Europe, maybe outside of Europe in general, the United States, but more looking at Africa and Asia, where people may not have the same access to that information as we are lucky to have in this part of the world. A lot of newspapers around the world have used Openstreetmap as the base map for displaying their coronavirus interactive websites. So here's the Berlin Morgen Post from Germany, obviously, which is, without needing to translate any German, is showing you the situation of the virus, the progression, etc., in Germany, but in surrounding countries as well. And then, of course, something I know nothing about, the epidemiology of the virus. But this is interesting in that this is something very, very sophisticated in terms of the science of the coronavirus, but using the Openstreetmap map as a means of showing where different genomic epidemiologies are related to and most prevalent to during these times. And of course, there's many maps such as these. The famous Johns Hopkins University map used Openstreetmap at the beginning, but then for whatever reason switched recently. But a very similar map generated by the GIS lab in University of Washington uses Openstreetmap. But not only that, this is an example of where Openstreetmap is being used to facilitate the production of information by combining it with information sources such as the World Health Organization and Wikipedia and Baidu, etc., etc. Interesting maps that just use Openstreetmap on their own, but in this case, it doesn't actually use any map as a background. Here's the renewable energy map of Europe according to Openstreetmap. So this is things like where there's solar farms, wind farms, and other types of renewable energy production around Europe. And we can clearly see that there is quite a breadth of this, to the point where we can easily make out the countries and the outline of the European map. So in the last, I suppose, 20 minutes or so, what I want to switch to now is to looking a little bit more at the actual data within Openstreetmap. So what we've seen so far is the Openstreetmap map in different thematic areas, in different applications, but essentially we are looking at the picture of the Openstreetmap database. So to go back again to Maynooth University, just so we can focus on one particular area that we can see, and if there are any people joining us on our call today, Maynooth is a small town, but like any university campus, it's a detailed urban infrastructure. There's buildings, there's pathways, there's roads, there's all of that type of infrastructure you would expect. And it's very useful to have a map of that. But look at something more complicated again. One of the most complex railway stations in the world, Penn Station in New York. Look how detailed the rendering of the data within the Openstreetmap database is, down to the individual tracks and the platforms, if you emphasize and zoom in even further. A country such as Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, in Africa. Traditionally, African cities would and African countries in general would suffer from a situation where government generated geographic data would not always be available and would not always be accessible to the public or to the citizens of that country. And that is a real problem. So Openstreetmap is something that not circumnavigates that problem, but actually provides a solution that doesn't need to get involved in that problem at all. So it's an open access database, and through various citizen-related projects, we have this incredibly detailed map of cities such as Dar es Salaam. Going to something smaller, those of you who are familiar with the islands off the coast of the west coast of Ireland, the Aran Islands, for example, Inisheer, looks like this on the map, so it looks like there's no detail at all. But when we zoom in there, we see this incredibly detailed map down to the very walls that separate the fields in that beautiful island off our coast. Going somewhere completely differently, right down to the south of our planet, Bird Island in Georgia, South Georgia, which is very famous as its name goes for different ornithological reasons. And again, the detail here in terms of the topography, and if you zoom in if you click on the link, the detail on the map is quite stunning. And I suppose there was a lot of people back 6 or 8 months ago probably didn't really hear of the city of Wuhan in China. Why I've chosen Wuhan is that we all know that it's in China now. And the incredible thing is that if we were browsing Openstreetmap and looking at Maynooth in Ireland, or we were looking at Newbridge or Naas in Ireland, they would be obviously rendered with English labels and Irish street names where appropriate. If we moved over to China, we would see the map of Wuhan localized to the local language and local symbology, depending on what that is. What kind of data is actually on those maps? Well, things that you won't see on those maps very clearly are in the Openstreetmap database. And a lot of people don't realize that there are over 1.3 million benches, park benches, benches outside railway stations, things like that, mapped and available in the Openstreetmap database. And we see a map of approximate distribution of those benches. I suppose the car is definitely a dominant factor of our lives in all parts of the world. And here's an example of Openstreetmap having the representation, the geographic representation of over 3 million parking areas or parking lots in the world. So how do we get to that the good stuff? So the sweet shop analogy there is, it's all very well to look outside at that beautiful display, but how do we get in and basically get working with that, the data? It's very, very easy. If you wanted to share your location, so if you're inviting somebody to visit Maynooth in a socially distanced way, of course, now, you can share a link to your location here in Maynooth or anywhere in the world by going to the Openstreetmap website and clicking the share button, that famous button that we're all familiar with now. And then you can just simply copy that link and send it in your text message or your email or your social media application. You can even download an image of it if you want by just clicking download here. So you can give someone the map of the area. Websites such as UMap actually do exactly what they say. You create the map. So UMap allows you to create maps with Openstreetmap in the background. So particularly if you had your own geographic data, you could actually import it into UMap using the web browser. There's no sophisticated tools required. And this would allow you then to create your own maps, many of which we've seen today. So you could create maps similar to those. One of the applications in Openstreetmap closest to my heart, because my PhD originally was in routing and navigation, is Open Route Service, which is a global routing engine for the entire world on Openstreetmap. So I've looked at something more local to myself here, where if I was traveling from Maynooth, Tesco's supermarket to a supermarket in the Midlands here in Edenderry, another Tesco's, it will give me the road trip details and some elevation information. And it will even allow me to download that as a GPX file. So what is that useful for? Well, you can download that route and then you can upload that into your sat nav. Or if this, for example, was a route that it was a hike in the mountains or something like that, you could probably put it into your navigator device or your smartphone nowadays. You can also download this in different formats. KML, for example, would allow you to display this on Google Maps. Overpass Turbo is another very easy way for you to get Openstreetmap data. So for example, if you wanted to download all of the parking lots in Dublin, for example, you just zoom into the Dublin area, do a search, and there's plenty of examples shown there. So what I've done here is I'm looking for restaurants in around the city centre. And what I've typed in here is amenity equal to restaurant. So just type restaurant into the wizard. And I then get the option to download this data in several common geographic data formats. GeoJSON being something that's used on the web a lot. GPX, again used in navigation devices. KML, which would be most familiar to those who work with Google Earth and Google Maps. If I did download that as part of a KML file, I could then show this in Google Earth. And I can then take advantage, for example, of Google Earth's incredible satellite imagery and street view imagery to further, I suppose, provide an immersive experience for me if I wanted to have a look around at that data and see where all of these restaurants were located. If you wanted to, when you get this presentation, try some of these out, zoom into your local area. And the reason why I'd say the area of interest is that you don't want to get back all of the trees in Ireland in one go. You might want to just look at your own region around your own home, for example. If you're a researcher or just someone who's just genuinely interested, you can go a step further by actually downloading OSM data in what's known as shapefile format. And if you're familiar with GIS, even if you did an introductory GIS course at some time in your career, you will have heard of shapefiles, and shapefiles are a standard way of storing geographic data. Now, what can we do with shapefiles? Well, we can use them in GIS systems. So here's an example of downloading the data for Ireland. And this is a company from Germany that supplies OpenStreetMap data for download for free, because that's part of the OpenStreetMap open access spirit, that this is a service that's been provided for the good of the community. Now, of course, this company will provide you with commercial services based on OpenStreetMap, but that's something that you would get into yourself on a one-to-one basis. But for the community, they make data available at a country level and region level for the entire world. So what can I do? If I downloaded the data for Ireland, a shapefile, you would see something like this, a folder full of files. The most important ones here is the ones down in this column here, the .shp file, the shapefile. If you use a GIS, and one of the most widely used GIS at the moment, which is free and open source, is called Qgis. It will work on any computer system that you're working on at the moment. Quantum GIS or Qgis will very easily just allow you to, for example, open up the shapefile representing all of the buildings in Ireland. So this is without any other mapping. This is OpenStreetMap buildings for the whole country. If we zoom in there, now we have access to the building information around Dublin City. I just draw attention to Dublin City because a lot of us, particularly people who are familiar with Dublin, will recognize that the famous, the Liffey, the shape of that structure. We have Stephen's Green here, we have O'Connell Street, etc. You can pick out the shape of the urban fabric there. So I suppose that's the how do we get at the data? What you do with the data, of course, is open to your own imagination. But if you were interested and motivated to become an OpenStreetMap contributor, the best thing to do is to sign up for the free account at openstreetmap.org. That will give you a link to the wiki or basically the website of OSM. And a good way is to get involved if you're going to become involved as an OpenStreetMap contributor based in Ireland. So you want to contribute to the Irish effort for a better OpenStreetMap in Ireland. You might like to follow the OpenStreetMap community on Twitter, on Facebook, on email lists, or the openstreetmap.ie website. And I think one of the key things, it's a bit like if you buy a house somewhere or rent a house somewhere, the best way to get involved with the local community is to get involved in an initiative that involves the local community. So if you're brand new to OpenStreetMap, the best way to get involved in OpenStreetMap Ireland is by one of these mediums here, and the community there is very welcoming, particularly to newcomers, and they will bring you inside the community and introduce you to what steps you can take to start contributing. One of the ways that you can start contributing on your own, very, very simply, is by logging into openstreetmap.org with your free account. And immediately then, after following maybe some introductory tutorials, you can start contributing information. What I've done here is I've just logged into Maynooth, and again, I know most of us are in our living rooms probably today, but we have the John Paul II library, where if things were more normal like they were several months ago, we would be giving this talk at the moment. We can click on that there and we see information about the building representing the John Paul II Library. Just to give you an example of community in Ireland, I want to just play you a little GIF image. It was generated by Heike Vasanto, from OSM Ireland, who is a passionate OpenStreetMap contributor and volunteer. And during the first lockdown in April, May, OpenStreetMap Ireland had what they called the hashtag Stay Home and Map Ireland Mapathon, which encouraged people from anywhere in Ireland to get involved with the OpenStreetMap project and simply map buildings in your local area. So maybe today, I move back, a particular day in April or May, Cork was chosen. Maybe the next day was Derry, the next day was Galway, and people could go into the OpenStreetMap database using the ID editor and make edits. So let me just show you an example of this, that if you can see the image in front of me here, the blue dots are showing you contributions that people are making at home. Watch for the clock down here at the bottom. And the dots are happening all over Ireland. So this was when we were in our lockdown. We were all asked to stay at home for practically all purposes, except for those essential purposes. And what you can see here is that those dots on the map individually may not seem like major contributions, but when you add them all together, you get 8 days and you get almost 40,000 buildings which were added onto OpenStreetMap in Ireland. So Heike created this visualization. Another incredible project driven by the OpenStreetMap community in Ireland is the townlands.ie project. And I suppose for anyone living in Ireland, or for people born in Ireland, people now new to Ireland, the townlands, the very wonderful structure of our divisions in terms of the geographic area of the country, in terms of data, is a very important aspect to a lot of research in Ireland, to particularly in understanding research at a local level. And I remember back when I was doing my own PhD many years ago and subsequent research, it was often very difficult to get this type of information. And now it's available completely free and open access from OpenStreetMap. And I'm just going to show you an example of how this project evolved over time. And Townlands project began. So this video takes about a minute. There's no sound, so you're not missing out anything. And you can see here that I may have to just click on the web for a moment. Apologies, that was one that I downloaded but didn't quite work. So this is the correct one now. That the Townlands project started a few years ago, but remember back previous to that, in 2009 and 10, people were mapping townlands, parishes, civil boundaries, etc. And look how the map is becoming more complete. Look how we see examples of coordinated efforts around Pacific counties and areas to map those kind of geographic administrative areas. And we soon see now when OpenStreetMap Ireland really began to coordinate the community effort into this type of mapping. A huge effort. You can only really marvel at what's been produced there. And this is not just something for OpenStreetMap. This is a public good, really, for all of us to use in our work in many different types of ways. And finally, OpenStreetMap is a very active academic research area. I suppose I've become well known within my research area because of OpenStreetMap. People write academic papers on it. There are conferences about OpenStreetMap and about the research related to that. I just draw your attention to two papers both of which are open access on preprint servers, and are both related to the pandemic response that every country has had to initiate over the last couple of months. Now, let's not worry about the actual nuts and bolts of the computer science behind this. What I want to draw your attention to here is Openstreetmap's role in this. Here we have a paper which is looking at measuring human activity and economic activity during things like lockdowns in various cities and regions. So Openstreetmap, the data I showed you in those shapefiles, is being used for locational information, but also to tell us where things like golf courses and car parks and supermarkets are. So here we see an example of before the outbreak of the virus in Colorado, for example, in one of the cities, we see an estimation of the number of cars parked in those areas, and then we see an estimation afterwards. The key role Openstreetmap is playing there is that it's up to date and freely available open access data that can be used to support this type of research. Another example, again related to the pandemic response in terms of looking at contact tracing, testing, and then containment or the restriction of movements. Now, again, I won't pretend to understand the epidemiological aspects of this, but what I will pretend to understand is the role that Openstreetmap is playing here, not just as the map that these maps are generated from, but also the actual data about things like site locations and how they would contribute to population density. So it's another paper available as a preprint on and open access. So to finish off, Openstreetmap is like a rich ecosystem. There is, in every healthy ecosystem, there is a role to be played by everyone. So even if you've never worked with Openstreetmap before, there is a contribution you make, because we all are local somewhere and we all could make that contribution that provides that dot on the map. And remember, every small contribution adds up when we scale it up to the big data scale that we're seeing. So thank you very much for taking part visually. I think we have a few minutes for questions, but I'm happy to take questions offline if you're interested. And I'm happy to help you with the how do I start, how do I do X or Y with Openstreetmap. I certainly love the Openstreetmap project. I encourage my students, every student project that I do that has geographic data in it, we would use Openstreetmap as the source. And certainly, I'm not sure how I would have managed in terms of geographic data over the last 10 to 15 years if it wasn't for this wonderful project. So thanks again to Fiona for the opportunity, and the gang in the library in Maynooth for giving me this opportunity.